Yes. I mean, like literally, like I'm surrounded by books right now because I've just been doing all of this research
Yeah,
and just like
same, you
all of
know?
this stuff. And so that's why like when I had a chance to,
Hop
you
in.
know, yeah, to hop in and like, hey, like I want to add in I want to add it, add to
Yeah.
this discussion as much as I can because there's so much that's being, sort of forgotten. And indeed, um, something that Charlie mentioned was the fact that, that Charlie, I don't know what your pronouns are, so I
She
apologize.
and her.
Uh, she, her? Okay, perfect. So she mentioned,
Charlie's
um,
best giggler, you know? She's like a genius, you know?
oh, perfect. That means that she's gonna keep me super, super honest, which is great. She mentioned that she was sad that no one brought up the colonial inspirations for the Holocaust, including the U.S. And yeah, like that's the reason why I thank you so much, Charlie. That's the reason why I wanted to sort of bring up the legacies of the Inquisition because of the fact that, that's part of the logics, the racial logics that sort of precipitate the creation of, you know, of all of the of many of these things, right? Like once you have the creation of, the Jew, crypto Jew, converso, and then the old Christian, right? Um,
Hmm.
once you begin these taxonomies, that's when you also begin at the same time. Again, the day after the Jews were expelled, or after, pardon me, the Edict of Expulsion was signed, I should say. The day after is when Christopher Columbus sailed to the United
Hmm.
States. I mean, maybe I don't know. He definitely ended up somewhere. No, we know where he landed in the Bahamas.
Hmm.
But one of the things that we sort of get in this context is that almost immediately they feel the need to taxonomize the peoples in which they came into contact with, right?
Hmm.
And this is why, again, we have the legacy of the term um, Indian, of course,
Yeah. Native
which it
Americans.
right, exactly. Which and the only reason why I mentioned that term is because in Latin America, it's still seen as it's still normalized to say that term,
Yeah, and
right? Like
Poland as well, actually.
and I've always found to me quite strange that it's like in the United States I prefer to use the indigenous peoples of the
Hmm.
Americas or but in the common parlance there is that, but the fact that then Spain decided to go all out to create this massive system of different ideas of blood quantum
Yeah.
um, that were then the basis for the United States, right, with their one drop rule, and Titan. I understand that, but academically speaking, um, we tend to stray away from using such terms. Like we don't use colloquial terms.
Hmm.
We try to use neutral terms so as to make sure that we're encompassing all of these things. Um, oh my gosh, yes. Oof, yeah, the passing of the Great Race.
Hmm.
That was something that, again, that is actually really interesting because he's known for, if I remember correctly, his his like ecological work. Like he was like a philanthropist when it came to like natural state parks um and stuff like that, kind of like John Muir in that time. But yeah, like if you read like if you just look at it, it is such a made up book because he puts in all of this supposed data, right? It's like, oh,
Hmm.
we have this data that blah blah blah, and Yeah, it's very strange because it's like it's always a justification for particularly Northern European
Oh,
Protestants, right? And I think to me that's one thing that's really interesting because this is when you begin to go away from this idea of the multiplicity of what these
oh,
exactly exactly, Daedalus. Using the terms indigenous people is a lot more accurate as well.
Karasuk
Um,
said an interesting thing.
but they yeah, you have this occurring where before there were the Gallic races, the Germanic races, the and there were Danubian Germans and there were the Saxons, and there was this
Right.
view of all of these again, and this goes back to what we were talking about earlier. It's like the idea of national consciousness as we think of it now really just did not exist at
Yeah.
all.
Like it
And
started in the 19th century, really.
exactly, it started in the 19th century, and it was a process of getting
Yeah,
to
yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And that's why I've met people who've tried to argue, or rather, I shouldn't say I've met people, but I've encountered people, right, so to
Mm-hmm.
speak, that try to say like, well, the Greeks, obviously, the ancient Greeks, obviously had some conception uh,
National
of
identity.
of national identity because they had the concept of Hellas. And then it's interesting too because if you actually read the literature of the time, it's like they're including people that are either not real,
Hmm.
that we know from anthropology and from history, but also the fact that we know that the Greek people as we know them were produced over a period of time. Um, and as all people are, right? And so I think to me it's that's again part of this mythos that
And
people try
also,
to get. Mhm.
sorry. Also,
No, no,
Greece was basically not one Greece, but it was like a collection of city-states, right? Like there was no,
exactly.
yeah, there was no one Greece, so to speak.
Exactly. And that's why to me, like, thinking of things in a quote unquote Hellenic context, it's like, well, they can, I mean, people can recognize that people speak similar languages, but some of the
Hmm.
dialects are mutually unintelligible, for example.
Yeah.
And also, I'm pretty sure that the colonies that were in what is now Iberia and in southern Sicily, etc., like they were not included in that idea of Hellas either. So I think to me that's where, again, we get this immense disconnect for people that try to say, ah, yes, there was always this
Yeah.
connection historically. And one example of this, which I think
But
to me is really interesting, is actually, I think Lonerbox actually brings this up, that the Germans in the 30s and 40s, when they were building, I forget what it is, but it's like this, the Hall of something. I can't remember exactly what it's called, but I think it was also in the Reichschancellery too.
yeah. Oh, sorry
That
to.
they
Uh,
that they had quotes of Germania um by Tacitus,
right.
who we know never actually went to Germania. Like he never actually went to that land
Yeah.
at all. He never really left central Italy. I mean, most evidence points to that he never left the Lazio region, which is the area right around Rome. Um, so anyway, but people try to use that as as this kind of like, ah, see, even back then the Romans could identify this like transcendent national identity of the German people, which is completely false.
Yeah.
He never met for all we know, he never actually met anybody who lived in what was then known as Germania Magna. So
Yeah. But sorry to interrupt because Kafka said something interesting. The term is used in Poland, very similar word, and the word Cyganie is actually also phased out of the common parlor in favor of saying the Romani people,
mhm.
is being phased out also as a not good word. Also,
Right. And
yeah, yeah.
mhm. Oh no, keep going,
Uh,
please.
Also, when it comes to the creation of the nations and nation identities, there were outliers to this. Like there were groups of Germans that did not identify with the newly formed German state, but also at the same time did not identify with the newly formed nation in the country that they lived in, you know? They lived as sort of like outsiders, but I having trouble remembering what country that was in. But there were situations like this, you know?
I mean, I definitely do know that there was an issue when Bavaria was initially, I mean, it was going to be put into the Deutsches Reich, in terms of the empire itself
Mm-hmm.
after 1871.
Right,
Um, but that, I mean, one, their dialect of German is mutually incomprehensible with what is spoken in Berlin, which is again, Germany is a polar language when it comes to like which dialects are spoken, et cetera, et cetera.
right. Since it was
So
like a bunch of small kingdoms before the unification.
exactly, and not only that, but it's like I also know how to speak Dutch Low Saxon, and like people that speak Dutch can't understand me fully, but people that speak Saxon, right, or that speak the Saxon dialects of German can't understand me at all, even though it's technically in the Saxon,
Right, and then you have
um,
like German from Austria, German from Switzerland, you know,
right,
Swiss
yeah,
German.
and I'm sure that, and I mean this is true even, I mean, for any language,
Mm-hmm.
but one thing that is very true um is that one thing to think about too when thinking about nationalism and this reified idea of the nation state is of course the fact that um, we see this transformation happening in live time, sort of, so to speak, as it's going on, and you do have these issues where it's like, well, the Belgians, are they truly a nation when they're the Wallonians and
Right,
the Flams, like they don't they like one of them is Dutch speaking, one of them is French speaking, and Belgium is just kind of created right in 1830, and this is the issue with trying to put everything within the paradigm of a Western nation state. And in fact,
that was the
if I
problem of
remember,
Czechoslovakia as well, right?
oh yeah, I mean, it's the problem of Russia. It's the problem of also of countries that are the prison houses of nations,
Mm-hmm.
but that still try to claim that they have some national, like the United States, for example. Like
Right,
there are Americans, but there are also hyphenated Americans, and then there are undocumented Americans, et cetera, et cetera. And
right.
this sort of
But I personally think that I should put it like not very rudely. The nation state thing was like a mistake, you know?
just like the
Uh,
internet now.
I think it's worse than the internet, the nation state, you know?
Um, and also, Ruhan, I think it's interesting that you bring up what happened in Sri Lanka because of the fact that um, one of the issues that particularly people like myself that do deal in genocide studies is that when we are talking about all of these different aspects and showing how there's a continuity of genocide that keeps going on is the fact that um, it this is the reason why this usage of definitions as per the UN or whatever
Yeah,
is never the the correct way of going about it, because it's too easy to discount treatment that is sorry, I was reading one of your chats, but it's too easy to discount genocides that are going on because they are often tied with especially because in many Western nations, they like to view the nations that, or the countries, I should say, that they created as a result of colonialism. They like to see them as though they are somehow like unique ethnic entities and everything. So that's one of the things that happens with when looking at
I will go quickly to the toilet, okay? And I'll be right back.
yeah, go right
And
ahead.
then I will invite you to do a little bit rant about Ukraine, okay?
Okay, sure.
Okay, I will be right back. Don't run away, okay?
Definitely not.
Do you promise?
So let's see here. An Entropy fan, Shrek is spot on. I mean, if you want to call me, it's Shakspier, but yes, genocides are long-term processes. That's why Thomas Kuhne, in his book, sort of talks about how you had to have these preconditions that slowly grow and grow and grow and grow. Let's see here. The Kaiser's Holocaust. Yes, that's a very important one when it talks about. Oh, it's funny. I actually have that one written down that you, Enzo Traverso, Understanding the Nazi Genocide, Marxism After Auschwitz. Very, very good intros. I would also suggest, well, I personally think, because I like to look at it through political economy as well, is Alfred Sohn Rettel's The Economy and Class Structure of German Fascism. So let me try to sort of give you a quick rundown of what that book is about. So Alfred Sohn Rettel was a sort of socialist who got a job in essentially the, how should I put this? Kind of like the Chamber of Commerce, we'll say, right? Like this, dealing with businesses. And because of that, he was on this street where all of these important ministries in Berlin were at. And but because he was tied with to doing reports and stuff like that for finance and the economics, he was able to observe the way in which the bourgeoisie allowed for the usage of fascism in order to do what it needed to do, so to speak. And the reason why I'm saying this is because, yeah, sure, I would be glad to. When I upload this video, this video that will come out on YouTube as well. So if you follow me on YouTube, this will show up here too. I'll put it as a pinned comment. I'll put a reading list of stuff. So what you sort of have happening is that
I am returned.
oh, wonderful.
Yeah.